What if the stranger sitting alone in the corner of a nearly empty diner wasn't just another late-night customer, but a billionaire running from a life he no longer wanted? And what if the waitress pouring his coffee, struggling to pay her mother's hospital bills, was about to unknowingly save him, and in return, have her entire future rewritten? Tonight, you'll see how a single moment of kindness can cross two very different worlds, spark an unlikely bond, and change everything. But here's the twist: neither of them saw it coming. Rain poured in silver sheets against the wide front windows of the Silver Lantern Diner, drumming steadily on the glass like a tired percussionist who'd been at it for hours. Outside, the neon coffee cup sign sputtered faintly, bleeding a halo of red light into the darkness of the street. The glow wavered each time the wind shoved against it, and water streamed down the glass in crooked rivers, distorting the view of the lonely parking lot beyond. Inside, the diner was warm but weary. The air carried the thick scent of fried bacon, overbrewed coffee, and lemon-scented floor cleaner. An old jukebox sat in the corner, its chrome edges dulled with age, humming faintly even though no record played. The hum mingled with the low buzz of the fluorescent lights above, lights that sometimes flickered, as if considering whether to keep working at all. Ava Collins stood by the corner booth, one hand holding a spray bottle half filled with diluted cleaner, the other gripping a rag already damp from a night's work. Her lower back ached from bending over tables. Her arches throbbed inside sneakers that had lost all cushioning years ago, and the elastic holding her chestnut curls was stretched so thin she could feel it slipping. She had been on her feet for nearly 9 hours, and the tips tonight barely covered what she needed for bus fare home. Her gaze drifted to the booth's window, the one everyone avoided during storms. It leaked in ways no one could quite fix, the wind sliding through invisible cracks to steal away the heat. The vinyl seat was cold, and the small puddle along the window ledge was a constant nuisance for the staff. Yet earlier that evening, the booth hadn't been empty. A man had sat there for nearly an hour alone, dressed in a way that didn't match this side of town. His overcoat was charcoal wool, its collar turned up against the rain. Beneath it, Ava had glimpsed the clean lines of a navy suit that looked hand-tailored. His presence had a quiet weight, as if he were used to stepping into rooms where conversations stopped and eyes turned toward him. He'd ordered black coffee and a club sandwich, but barely touched either, just one sip of coffee, one distracted bite of bread. His hands, broad and sure, rested on the table, fingers occasionally drumming against the mug in a slow, restless rhythm. Ava had approached with the kind of careful tone you use for someone who might not want company. "Everything all right, sir?" she'd asked. He'd lifted his eyes just enough to meet hers for a second, eyes that seemed far away even while looking right at her, and given a small nod. No smile, no words. Now the booth was empty. The plate still held a limp half sandwich. The coffee sat cold in the cup. Ava slid the plate toward her tray, lifted the mug, then froze. Between the vinyl cushion and the table's edge, barely visible in the dim light, was a black leather wallet. She glanced instinctively toward the counter. The cook was scraping down the grill, back turned. The other waitress had disappeared into the storage room. No one was looking her way. Her fingers closed around the wallet. It was heavier than she expected, the leather soft and clearly expensive. She flipped it open. Inside were crisp stacks of $100 bills, more money than she'd seen in one place in months. A platinum credit card gleamed beside them. A driver's license read, James Whitaker. No photo, just a clean font, an embossed seal, and an address in the wealthiest part of the city. Her chest tightened. One bill could pay for her mother's medication. 2 could keep the landlord quiet for another month. All of it could lift them, at least for a while, out of the constant edge of disaster life they'd been living. She glanced toward the ceiling. The cameras didn't cover this booth. The man might not even remember where he'd lost it. Her pulse pounded in her ears, loud enough to drown out the hum of the lights and the hiss of the fryer. Then, in the stillness of her own mind, she heard her mother's voice, firm but gentle, the way she'd spoken to Ava when she was a child. "You don't lose who you are, no matter how much the world takes from you." Ava exhaled slowly, slid the bills back into place, and closed the wallet. She walked straight to the manager's office and knocked. "Someone left this in booth 6, she said. Her manager looked up from his paperwork, eyebrows rising as he took the wallet from her. "You sure you want to hand this in? Looks like a month's rent in here." "I'm sure." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll mail it to the address on the license. You did the right thing, kid." Ava gave a faint smile, but said nothing. She didn't feel like a kid. She didn't feel like a hero either. She just felt tired. The rain outside had only grown heavier by the time Ava finished her shift. The kind that didn't just fall. It attacked, slicing diagonally through the air in sharp, cold lines. She stepped out from under the diner's faded awning and was hit instantly, the icy drops slipping past her jacket collar, finding the space between skin and fabric. Her jacket clung to her shoulders in seconds, and water seeped down her spine. She pulled it tighter out of instinct, but it was no defense. The sidewalk was a patchwork of puddles and slick concrete, the kind that caught reflections of the street lamps like broken mirrors. Each step splashed water up her shins, soaking her socks and chilling her feet until she could no longer feel her toes. The city seemed emptier than usual. A few late buses rumbled by, tires hissing over the wet asphalt. Storefronts were dark, their metal gates locked, the signs in their windows glowing faintly from battery-powered displays. Her neighborhood, Eastview, was already prone to blackouts, and tonight the outage was complete. Street lights blinked uncertainly, some giving up entirely, leaving pockets of darkness between the flickers. Ava's apartment building was a narrow, aging structure tucked halfway down a block that most people crossed the street to avoid. The paint on the brick facade had long since peeled away, revealing the tired bones beneath. The stairwell smelled faintly of damp wood and mildew. She climbed to the second floor, keys cold and slick in her fingers, and unlocked the door. The hinges creaked as it opened into the small, one-room apartment she shared with her mother. The space was warm compared to outside, but the heat came from a single humming radiator that clanked sporadically, like it was struggling to remember how to work. Her mother, Linda Collins, lay sleeping in the narrow bed against the far wall. The blanket, pulled up to her chin, was thin, but it was all they had. Her breathing was soft but shallow, the way it often was when she was tired from her dialysis appointments. Ava hung her jacket over the back of a chair and crossed quietly to the kitchenette. The small counter was cluttered with mugs and a chipped kettle that had been with them for as long as she could remember. She filled the kettle at the sink, the water gurgling into the metal, and set it on the gas stove. The blue flame hissed to life, casting a faint glow on the peeling wallpaper behind it. Opening the narrow drawer beside the stove, she reached for the bottle of her mother's medication. When she tipped it into her hand, a single pill rattled out. Her shoulders sagged. She could cut it in half, maybe stretch it for 2 days, but she knew the dosage wasn't meant to be split. And the refill meant another fight with the insurance company. More forms. More time they didn't have. The kettle whistled softly. Ava poured the hot water into a mug, steam curling upward, and carried it to the small, wobbly table by the window. She sat, hands wrapped around the cup, letting the heat seep slowly into her palms. Outside, the rain traced long streaks down the glass, warping the view of the street below. Her mind wandered back to the man in the booth, James Whitaker. She could picture him there again, shoulders slightly hunched, despite the perfect tailoring of his suit, the quiet restlessness and the way he'd touched the coffee cup. She wondered if he was home now, in some high-rise apartment where the lights didn't flicker, where the hum of the fridge and the click of the thermostat made the silence feel safe instead of suffocating. Did he even realize his wallet was gone? Or was it still sitting unopened in his coat pocket, the loss unnoticed in the rush of his night? Ava sipped her tea slowly. She hoped he got it back. She hoped, foolishly, that if he did, he would think about the waitress who had returned it, and maybe, just maybe, he would know she had needed that money and walked away from it anyway. But hope was a dangerous indulgence in her world, so she pushed it aside and focused on the quiet sound of her mother's breathing. She had no way of knowing that the wallet was already on its way to James Whitaker, carried through the storm in the back of a mail truck, and that her quiet decision tonight had set something in motion. Because sometimes the smallest kindness doesn't just echo, it finds its way back. High above the storm-soaked city, James Whitaker sat alone in the top-floor office of his penthouse apartment. The glass walls around him framed the skyline like a photograph, buildings glowing in scattered points of white and amber, their lights reflected in the slick black river that cut through the city. The space was immaculate, polished wood floors that whispered under footsteps, a massive desk in deep walnut, and a wall of books he rarely opened anymore. The faint ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner was the only sound in the room. James leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingers to his temples. The day had been long, though lately they all felt that way. Board meetings that used to energize him now left him hollow. Conversations with executives felt scripted. The numbers in the quarterly reports were fine, better than fine, but the satisfaction he once drew from them had evaporated. His gaze drifted to the framed photograph on the credenza behind him. It was of a smiling woman in her 40s, standing in front of a diner with her hands on her hips. Claire, his wife. She had loved places like that, diners with chrome trim, waitresses who called you Han, and coffee that came in mismatched mugs. He hadn't been back to one in years, not since the cancer took her, not since the silence in his home became something he didn't know how to live with. A sharp knock at the office door broke through his thoughts. "Come in," James called. Marcus, his driver of 15 years, stepped in holding a small padded envelope. The paper was damp along the edges, as if it had been carried through the rain. "Sir, this came certified from a place called the Silver Lantern Diner," Marcus said, offering it. James frowned, setting aside his glasses and taking the envelope. The return address was unfamiliar. He tore the flap open and slid out its contents, a black leather wallet wrapped in a thin receipt sleeve. His wallet. He opened it carefully. Every bill was in place, the platinum credit card untouched. But something else caught his eye. A sticky note tucked behind his driver's license. "Found this at your table. Hope it gets back to you safe. Ava, waitress." The handwriting was neat, the kind of careful script that came from someone who didn't want to be misunderstood. James read it twice, then a third time. The image of her face began to return. The young woman with damp curls pulled into a loose bun, eyes tired but focused, voice quiet when she'd asked if everything was all right. He had noticed her, but only faintly at the time, distracted by his own thoughts. He remembered the storm outside, the way the rain streaked down the glass beside their booth. Marcus cleared his throat. "Shall I send a reward, sir?" James didn't answer immediately. In his world, generosity often had a motive. Kindness usually came with strings. Yet here was proof that someone, a stranger, had gone out of their way to do the right thing when no one was watching. "Not yet," James said finally, slipping the note back into the wallet. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. James set the wallet on the desk and turned toward the wall of glass. The rain was still falling, tracing winding paths down the window. On impulse, he picked up his phone and typed Silver Lantern Diner into the search bar. The map app found it in seconds across town, tucked into a part of the city where he hadn't set foot in over a decade. Open until midnight. He didn't know exactly why, but the urge to go back there was immediate. Not as James Whitaker, CEO of Whitaker and Hale Capital, but simply as a man with a question he couldn't quite name. The bell above the Silver Lantern Diner's door gave a soft chime as James stepped inside the following evening. This time, he wasn't wearing the kind of suit that made people stand a little straighter. He'd left the cufflinks, the watch, and the polished shoes at home. Instead, he wore dark jeans, a plain gray jacket, and boots that had seen more than a few rainy sidewalks. The change wasn't just in his clothing. It was in his posture. He didn't walk in with the air of someone used to owning the room. Tonight, he just wanted to blend into the background. The diner was nearly as quiet as the night he'd been there before. The same warm, slightly greasy smell lingered in the air. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead blended with the faint sizzle of something cooking on the grill in the back. Ava was behind the counter, wiping down a row of coffee mugs with a towel. She looked up when he entered. For the briefest moment, her hands paused, and something flickered across her face, recognition, maybe even surprise. but she masked it quickly with the practiced smile of someone who'd learned to keep her thoughts to herself at work. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice steady. "Please." Black. He made his way to the same corner booth, sliding into the seat with the ease of someone settling into a memory. Ava brought the cup over a minute later, setting it down in front of him. "You were here the other night, right?" I think you left your wallet." "I got it back," he said, meeting her gaze. "Thanks to you." She shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I just mailed it." "You could have kept it," he said, his tone not accusing, but curious. "I wouldn't do that." There was no hesitation in her voice, no defensiveness, just quiet certainty. James felt something in his chest ease, a small, unexpected sense of relief. He smiled, and it wasn't the polite, boardroom smile he used when shaking hands with investors. It was smaller, warmer, the kind of smile that crept up without permission. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ava Collins." "I'm James," he said. He didn't add his last name. "Not tonight." Ava nodded, then turned back toward the counter. For the rest of the evening, their exchanges were short. A refill here, a comment about the rain there. But something unspoken lingered between them, an understanding neither of them could yet define. When he left, James placed a folded bill under his coffee cup. It was generous, but not ostentatious. Not enough to feel like pity. And the next night, he came back. On his third visit in as many days, James arrived just after the dinner rush. The booths were mostly empty, save for a truck driver nursing a slice of pie near the window and a young couple hunched over a shared basket of fries. Ava was refilling the sugar dispensers when he came in. She glanced up, her mouth tilting into that same small smile she always gave him, not overly warm, but genuine in a way that made it feel rare. He slid into the corner booth, and she brought his coffee without asking. "What would you be doing if you weren't here?" he asked after a moment, his voice low, as though the question wasn't entirely casual. She raised a brow. "You mean if I won the lottery or something?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "If one thing in your life had gone differently. Just a small shift." Ava rested the coffee pot on the edge of the table and leaned against the seat opposite him. "I was studying finance," she said finally. 2 semesters in. Then my mom got sick. Medical bills don't wait, and the rent wasn't going to pay itself. So I came home. "You planning to go back?" Her shoulders lifted in a slight shrug. "I want to, but dreams are expensive." James studied her for a moment. "You're good with people." "I bring coffee," she said with a faint smirk. "You do more than that," he replied, and something in his tone made her glance away. "What about you?" she asked, shifting the focus. "What do you do?" "I'm semi-retired," he said after a beat, choosing his words carefully. "You don't look retired." "I'm good hiding it." Her lips curved into a small laugh, and the sound felt warmer than the coffee between them. They didn't speak much after that, but the quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that hinted at more conversations to come. When James left that night, he realized he wasn't coming back for the coffee anymore. A thin drizzle replaced the downpour by the time Ava hurried in for her shift the following evening. Her hair clung in damp curls around her face, and the sleeves of her thrift store cardigan were dark at the cuffs where the rain had soaked through. She tied on her apron as she walked, apologizing to the cook, to the busboy, to no one in particular, an instinct built from years of trying not to inconvenience the world. James was already in the corner booth. He watched her cross the floor with the steady patience of someone who had nowhere else he'd rather be. When she finally reached him, slightly breathless, he lifted his hand in a small, reassuring wave. "You're okay?" he asked. "Clinic run," she said, pouring his coffee. "My mom had a rough morning. Insurance is being insurance." She tried to make it a joke and failed. "Sorry, you didn't ask for the saga." "I don't mind hearing it." The simple sincerity in his voice surprised her. She glanced at the window, where water beaded and slipped down the glass in glistening threads. "You ever feel like life just paused?" she asked quietly. like you're holding your breath for a year and a half, and everyone else is living on fast forward. All the time, he said, and the honesty of it softened something in her. Sometimes it feels like the rooms get bigger and I get smaller. She smiled at that, sad and knowing. Yeah, that. The dinner rush thinned early. Rain kept most people home, and the jukebox flickered through a run of old standards that made the room feel warmer than it was. When the last table paid, and the cook started scraping down the grill, Ava carried 2 slices of cherry pie to the corner booth and set one in front of him. I didn't order, James said, amused. You never do, she replied, sliding into the opposite seat without asking permission, the way you do only when a person has become safe. But it's against house rules to leave without dessert. We have house rules. We do now. He took a bite. Cinnamon and tart fruit, and a crust that crumbled just right. The taste pulled a thread he hadn't touched in years, leading him back to a kitchen with a fogged-up window and a woman laughing as she pressed dough into a tin. He didn't say her name out loud. He didn't have to. The ache and the gratitude arrived together, familiar companions. Good? Ava asked. Better than good, he said, then cleared his throat. Thank you. She smoothed the edge of her napkin. I'm sorry about earlier. I'm not usually late. It's just, sometimes the clinic bumps her and the bus. You don't owe me an explanation. I know. She looked at him for a long second. I think I just wanted someone to know. I do, he said. I know. The diner's lights hummed. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm. For a while, they just ate pie like ordinary people with ordinary days. When the plates were clean and the checks sat untouched between them, James reached for a napkin and a pen the waitress before Ava had left in a cracked ceramic cup. He hesitated just a second and wrote, Sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time, so they can help each other find their way back. He folded the napkin once, then set it by her side of the table. What's that? She asked, tentative, as if the paper might be something fragile. A thought that wouldn't leave me alone, he said. She unfolded it, read the line twice, and pressed her lips together the way people do when they're keeping something from spilling over. She refolded the napkin carefully and slipped it into the pocket of her apron like it was a receipt for something she could not afford to lose. Thank you, she whispered. He stood, slid a tip beneath the edge of the check, enough to be kind, not enough to embarrass, and shrugged into his jacket. Get some sleep, Ava, he said. You too, James. He stepped into the night, the bell above the door chiming once like a blessing, and she watched his reflection disappear into the wet street until only the neon halo of the coffee cup remained. After close, with chairs flipped onto tables and the floor still drying in streaks, Ava fished the napkin from her apron. She read the line again under the hum of the lights. The words weren't a promise, not exactly. They were something sturdier, a direction. She folded the square smaller and tucked it into her wallet beside the single bus pass she guarded like treasure. On the walk home, the drizzle thinned to a mist. She let it bead on her eyelashes and didn't wipe it away. Somewhere above the clouds, the city's glow made its own moon. And down here, on cracked pavement and between puddles, Ava felt the first quiet suggestion of something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. Possibility. 2 nights later, James walked into the diner and immediately noticed something was wrong. Ava wasn't there. The counter was manned by another waitress, a teenager with earbuds dangling from her collar, more focused on scrolling through her phone than on the coffee cups she was refilling. The air felt different, hollow somehow, without Ava moving between tables, her presence a quiet anchor in the room. James sat in the corner booth anyway, more out of habit than hunger. He sipped coffee that tasted thin and overbrewed, glancing toward the kitchen door every time it swung open, half expecting her to appear. After 20 minutes, he asked the cook, Is Ava off tonight? The man shook his head, concern lining his face. No show. First time that's happened in months. Hope her mom's okay. James nodded, though the answer didn't satisfy him. Something tugged at him, a voice in the back of his mind, his late wife's voice, whispering the same thing she used to when he hesitated too long. Don't let silence answer your questions. He left a few bills under the mug and stepped out into the cold. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like it. By the time he got home, the decision had already taken root. The next morning, a thin manila folder lay on his desk, courtesy of his assistant Claire. Inside, Ava Collins, 22. Part-time student on pause. Lives in Eastview Apartments. Primary caregiver to Linda Collins, currently admitted to St. Mary's Public Hospital. Complications from kidney failure. No legal trouble. No debts beyond the ordinary. Just a young woman carrying too much. Too early. James stared at the folder longer than he needed to, then closed it gently. He made a single phone call to the hospital's billing department. The payment was processed before the end of the hour. No name attached. 3 days later, Ava returned to the diner. She moved slower than usual, her shoulders rounded from exhaustion, but there was something bright in her eyes, a lightness that hadn't been there before. James was already in the corner booth. When she saw him, she froze for a heartbeat, then crossed the room with a shy, almost relieved smile. "I didn't think you'd still be coming," she said, pouring his coffee. "I like the pie," he replied simply. That drew a small laugh from her, soft but real. "My mom, she had to be admitted suddenly," Ava said, her voice low. "I didn't have the money for it. I thought they were going to send her home. But then, someone paid part of the bill. The hospital wouldn't tell me who. I cried when I found out. I wish I could thank them." James stirred his coffee slowly, watching her. "Maybe some people just believe you deserve a little kindness." She blinked, like she caught a glimpse of something in his tone, but didn't press. Later, when the last table had cleared and the cook was stacking chairs, Ava approached his booth again, this time with an envelope in hand. "I wanted to give you this," she said. Inside was a simple thank you card, her handwriting filling the space in careful, even lines. "For showing up, for listening, for reminding me the world can be kind." James read it twice before slipping it into his coat pocket. "Ava, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly, almost shy. But he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope of his own. "Then let me give you this." She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a typed letter and a glossy brochure. "Dear Ava, returning that wallet reminded me that integrity still matters. You gave without asking. Let me give something back. Tuition for an accredited online finance program, flexible enough to keep your job and care for your mom. If you accept, I'll personally mentor you. No strings, just belief. J.W." Her eyes lifted from the page, wide. J.W. James Whitaker. He nodded slowly. "Yes, the Whitaker. Only on paper," he said softly. "In here, I'm just a man who believes in you. I can't accept this." "You can," he said gently. "You earned it before you ever knew my name." Her voice trembled. "Why me?" "Because when I was lost," he said, "you helped me feel found." Life didn't lurch so much as tilt. Morning still began with the kettle's thin whistle and the radiator's clank. Ava still laced the same tired sneakers, still folded napkins into tidy triangles at the diner before the dinner rush. But there was something new threaded through the familiar. A login screen that greeted her name, a syllabus that felt like a map, and a letter tucked at the back of her drawer that she reread on nights when doubt got loud. She started with 2 classes, corporate finance and financial modeling, because the counselor said it was ambitious but sane. The refurbished laptop hummed like a window fan, and the space bar stuck unless she pressed it with the pad of her thumb. She didn't mind. After months of watching possibility from the bleachers, she was on the court. The first evening, she sat up at the tiny kitchen table with a legal pad, 2 pens, and a mug of coffee that was mostly determination. Her mother shuffled in with a blanket around her shoulders. "Don't stay up too late," Linda said, her voice rough from sleep, but warm with pride. "Even racehorses rest." "I'm a diner waitress with a laptop," Ava said, smiling. The metaphor might be generous. "Then you're a racehorse in disguise." When the lecture started, the professor's voice crackled through cheap earbuds, talking about time value of money and opportunity, cost with the zeal of someone introducing a favorite book. Numbers didn't scare her. They steadied her. She had always liked how they stayed true, even when life didn't. On James's next visit, she slid a folded printout across the table. Her first quiz grade. A perfect score. He didn't reach for it right away. He looked at her, really looked, as if committing the moment to memory. "Of course you did," he said. "It was multiple choice," she said, but the smile in her eyes said she was letting herself feel proud. The diner became her library. On slow nights, she perched at the end of the counter, laptop open, calculator tucked beside the creamers. She learned to pause a model mid-formula to refill a regular's cup, to switch from PV and FV to, "How's your granddaughter, Mr. Klein?" without losing her place. "Show me your logic," James said one rainy night, pushing aside his pie plate. He didn't correct her. He asked questions. Why that assumption? What happens if the rate shifts? What's the story the numbers are telling you? She learned that good questions could be a kind of kindness. On the fourth week, the modeling assignment landed like a small storm. Build an integrated 3-statement model for a mid-market manufacturer. Defend your assumptions. Stress test your outputs. She wrote assumptions in tidy bullet points and taped them above the table. Unit growth is earned. Margins aren't a given. Cash is oxygen. At midnight, the radiator sighed and the city thinned to sirens and the occasional bus braking in the distance. Ava rubbed her eyes, recalculated working capital, then recalculated again because certainty matters when you don't get second chances. A text lit her phone. "James, remember to stand up every 45 minutes. Genius needs circulation." She laughed silently, stood, and stretched until her back popped. When she sat again, the problem that had knotted itself at the center of the model loosened, like a jar that opens on the second try. She submitted the project 2 minutes before the deadline, heart thudding, then stared at the ceiling and tried to forget it existed. 2 days later, the grade posted. An A. The professor's note at the bottom. Clear, defensible assumptions. You have an analyst's brain and a storyteller's restraint. Keep going. Ava read it twice, then 3 times, and felt something rise in her chest that wasn't quite laughter and wasn't quite tears. She screenshot the comment and typed before she could overthink it. "Ava, I did it." She didn't attach the image. She didn't need to. A minute later. "James, I never doubted you. Proud of you anyway." That night at the diner, she brought 2 slices of cherry pie and, for the first time, sat before he invited her to. "Tell me about the boardroom," she said between bites. "Not the furniture. The choices." He leaned back, eyes softening. "The best choices look like math until you remember they're people. The worst ones hide that they're about people by throwing math at them. So build models that tell the truth. And ask what the truth costs," he added. "To whom?" The jukebox shuddered and switched tracks. Rain needled the window. Ava felt the shape of her life changing, not with fireworks, but with the quiet click of pieces sliding into place. A concept understood, a question asked, a hand steady on the page. Near closing, a delivery guy pounded and soaked, leaving a cardboard box on the counter. "For Ava Collins," he said, reading the label like a surprise. "From Whitaker and Hale." She frowned, signed, and pried the tape with a butter knife. Inside, beneath a cushion of brown paper, lay a slim, used external monitor and a compact docking station, both clean and clearly refurbished. A note on company letterhead sat on top, for the models that deserve a little more screen. D. A secret admirer? The cook teased. A practical one, Ava said, cheeks warm. She glanced toward the corner booth. James's brows were up, his palms open in a don't-look-at-me gesture that fooled no one. "Dana Wu," he said when she brought the note over. "Heads-up programs. She likes winning, but she likes building more." Ava traced the edge of the paper. "I can't repay any of this." "You already do," he said. "Every time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong." When the lights went off and the lock clicked, Ava carried the box home like something fragile. She set the monitor on the wobbling table, propped it with a folded magazine to level it, and stood back. It wasn't much. It was everything. Her mother woke to the rustle and blinked at the glow. Looks like a spaceship. Just a second screen, Ava said, laughing, for when the numbers need more room. Linda watched her a moment. You're lighter, she said. Even with all this work, you look lighter. I think I'm moving again, Ava said, surprised to hear the words and discover they were true. I didn't realize how still I'd been. Later, in bed with the city's hush pressing gently at the windows, she pulled the napkin from her wallet and smoothed it across her palm. Sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time, so they can help each other find their way back. Underneath, she wrote in tiny letters with a dull pencil, sometimes the wrong time is the only road to the right place. She slid the napkin back, turned off the lamp, and let the dark be kind for once. Winter leaned hard into the city that month, pressing frost into the edges of windows and sending breath curling into the air like steam from an old kettle. The diner kept its lights low and its coffee hot, and James kept to his corner booth, watching Ava move with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. One Thursday night, the rush came early and left slow. Ava was halfway through wiping down the counter when a man in an expensive coat stepped in. He carried himself like someone who had never had to wait for anything, his expression the kind that measured people before deciding if they were worth his time. Looking for James Whitaker, he said, scanning the room. James lifted his hand without standing. Evening, Robert. Ava froze at the sound of his voice, different now, formal, clipped. Robert walked over, ignoring the menu and the holder. Board's nervous. They're talking about dissolving the community fund. Says it's not generating direct returns. James's jaw tightened. It's not meant to. They'll want to vote next week. James leaned back, his gaze flicking once toward Ava before returning to Robert. Then I'll be there. Robert looked like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. He left with the same quiet entitlement he'd walked in with. When Ava approached with the coffee pot, she didn't ask what it was about. I didn't know you were still active. I'm not, he said, then smiled faintly. Except when I am. That night, James drove home through streets strung with brittle Christmas lights, thinking about how easily men in suits could decide what did and didn't matter. He thought about Ava, bent over her laptop, piecing together a future one formula at a time. The vote came on a Tuesday. James walked into the boardroom in a charcoal suit that still fit like it had been made yesterday. He listened to the arguments, efficiency, fiscal responsibility, shareholder value, until it was his turn. You measure value in profit, he said. I measure it in lives changed. You can close the fund, but you'll be closing doors people didn't even know were there to knock on. When the vote passed in his favor by a single margin, he didn't smile. He just folded his papers, left the building, and drove straight to the diner. Ava was there as always, moving between tables with that calm, deliberate grace. She spotted him, and something in her face lit. Not surprise, not awe, just a quiet recognition, like greeting a familiar star. He sat, and she brought him coffee. Neither spoke for a while. Outside, snow began to fall in slow, deliberate spirals. I have a question for you, he said at last. She tilted her head. Okay, when you finish the program, what's next? She hesitated, then laughed softly. For the first time, I don't know. And that doesn't scare me anymore. He nodded. Good. They talked about small things then. The pie recipe, the stubborn radiator in her apartment, the ridiculous price of bus fare, until the night wore thin. As he stood to leave, he slid an envelope across the table. She frowned, opening it to find not money, but a single sheet of paper. Collins Financial Consulting, incorporation documents. Her breath caught. This is. Yours, he said simply. A name, a start. You'll build the rest. Ava blinked fast, then smiled in that way that reached her eyes and stayed there. Thank you, James, for everything. He shook his head. You did the work, Ava. I just made sure you had the light to see it. When he stepped out into the snow, she watched him go, the bell above the door chiming once like a promise. She knew there would be other storms, other late nights, Other mountains that looked too high until she climbed them. But she also knew this. Sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time, so they can help each other find their way back. And sometimes, if they're lucky, the road takes them exactly where they're meant to be.